All right, good evening, happy July. We're going to get started here. Tonight is our fourth to last meeting of the Central Ohio.NET Developer Group for the year, which is crazy because we're, the mid-year marker. But we meet the fourth Thursday of every month here at Improving. Thank you, Improving, for hosting us. And if you do the math on that, the fourth Thursday of November is usually a little busy, and the fourth Thursday of December is often a little busy for folks. And so we are going until October, as we always do. And so tonight is our annual tradition of lightning talks. We have 6 lightning talks scheduled for tonight, which should be a lot of fun. We'll get started with those here shortly. And then the rest of the year, our schedule for August is going to be James Otworth over there is going to be giving us a longer version of his talk that he's giving us tonight on Playwright. So he'll be doing actual code demos and more interactive and the like. So if you have feedback for him that you'd like to see next month, let him know. For September, we have Barrett Blake talking about .NET Aspire and what the heck that is and why that's awesome and good for building and bootstrapping new .NET applications. I'm still trying to wrestle with what .NET Aspire is personally, so I'm looking forward to that one. And then in October, our last meeting of the year, we're going to have Chris over there in the back talking about logging, which should be a lot of fun because logging is useful if your code doesn't work. I don't know if anybody here has ever had code not work before, but I'm told that if your code doesn't work, it's very helpful. So that's our schedule for the year. If you have things or speakers you'd like us to have for next year, let us know. We're looking forward to that. But since we have 6 10 to 20 minute talks tonight, I am going to just turn us over to our first speaker here shortly. I'll tell you what we can expect tonight first, though. So our first speaker is going to be Mr. Alan Barber talking about architecture testing with .NET Arch tests. How do you pronounce that? Arc?
Yeah, however you want to say it.
However you want to say it. There you go. That's the official word.
Yeah.
Bill Melvin is going to be talking about the sad case of the drowned books, which sounds like a horror movie to me. I love my books.
Sad.
Yes, it's very sad. I don't know why he said yes to this. James is going to be talking about Playwright, as we mentioned. And then Sean back there is going to be talking about agile concepts, parkour versus Scrum. Presumably, Sean, you will be saying parkour every so often as you talk. Yeah, okay. So instead of advancing slides, you'll just say parkour. Yeah, I like this. Okay. And then Ashley is going to be talking about Girls Who Code. Her title is Brave, Not Perfect. I love that. Creative Projects from Girls Who Code. That's a great title. I love that. And then we're slated to have Jeffrey Miller here. He's not here yet, but we're hoping he's going to be our closer. If he's not, I'll sub in. But Jeff's talk is going to be on navigating IT career development through something that I can't read. So hopefully he can sketch him with that last word. Oh, curves, yes. So through curves when your career doesn't go the way you expect it to. I need to work on my penmanship. But with that, I'll turn it over to Alan, who's talking about something completely different.
So let me kill the lights here first before we get started. So everyone can see.
It's counterintuitive.
I know. It's crazy talk. Alright, let's do this. Come on. I only have one actual machine, which is currently streaming, so I'm using my terribly old Chromebook. So, cry for me. Alright, it's working. Yay! Woo! Hot damn. Come on. Alright, so tonight I just wanted to introduce everyone to something that I actually just learned about like 2 months ago. And I was so cool and so excited about it that I was like, we got to implement this on the project I was on, and we went a little crazy with it and had some fun with it. I'm like, alright, now I got to tell everyone about it. So we're learning about architectural rules specifically, but there's a NuGet package called NetArch test or NetArch test, however you want to pronunciate it. I'm not going to enforce anything, it's the GIF versus GIF and all that, whatever. We're always going to fight about how to pronounce things. But anyways, it's a fluent API for .NET that can enforce architectural rules and unit tests. As always, I love my little disclaimer. I'm no expert. I'm still learning. I make no guarantees. This is everything I'm going to tell you is as true as I believe it to be, but that's no guarantee of anything. All right, so the problem at hand. Enforcement of software architectural patterns is difficult. In general, it requires discipline and thorough code reviews. You have to make sure that every check-in still follows the rules we all agree upon, and people don't change anything about how the code works. And sometimes it's hard to look at a huge hunk of check-in, and so you don't notice the fact that someone's decided to just throw a wrench in the architectural patterns that everyone agreed that they were going to use. Again, we have to make sure that all developers must agree to follow them in the first place, which is kind of hard because, how many people worked on a team? You got that cowboy coder out there, or the rock star, or whatever terms they like to use, that they just throw it all in the wind. They just do whatever which way they want, and they don't give a crap about patterns or practices. I get it done faster than everyone else. That's the important thing. Well, yeah, but your code is complete garbage. We want clean, nice code. And again, the other big issue is team dynamics change as developers come and go. It's real easy when everyone agrees to those patterns, and then how many people, again, worked on teams where the original developers for the project, none of them work at the company anymore. It's kind of hard to make sure that the original rules are still being enforced properly. Of course, again, the stress of deadlines make you skip best practices. We all know this one. It's just a quick hack. Or factor it later, I swear. 6 years later, there's only 50 quick hacks in the system now. We'll totally get to it, I promise. So they give us some time to do some cleanup. Never happens. So the solution, well, we need to have enforcement of standards by testing. So what are we doing here? We're going to add a new category of tests to our testing. We've got unit tests. Everyone knows what unit tests are. We've got integration tests. Hopefully you know what integration tests are. Now we're going to add this idea of architecture tests. Tests that test the architecture of the code. So that's where we introduce NetArch test, or NetArch test. It's created by a guy named Ben Morris. And it's actually inspired by, a lot of .NET things are inspired by Java libraries. So there's a Arch unit library for Java that basically does the same thing. And he's like, that's pretty freaking cool. I'm doing it for .NET. Again, it's a fluent API. Makes it really easy to write code that enforces those rules in unit tests. And you just find it on NuGet as netarchtest.rules. You gotta make sure to find that one so that you get the right one. So let's talk about writing rules. It's really easy to create them, especially with the Fluent API. You load a set of types, give it a path, an assembly, or a namespace. And this is code analysis. So this is looking at your code, parsing out all the includes and everything, and then you put some filters on it the way you want it, and then you apply a set of conditions to validate it. So let's look at some examples here. Hopefully you can read those. All right.
Quick question.
Yo.
Yeah. You said it looks at your code. Do you know if it uses its own engine or if it uses like Roslyn or something?
It uses, you caught me here.
It's okay.
It's a Sealy, or the Sealy package.
Okay.
It's a low level IL something.
Okay.
There's been talk of replacing Roslyn, but it's that's basically requires a rewrite of the entire thing. So I don't know. Maybe version 10 will get around.
But if it's using IL, then it's going to be a little flexible.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Yes. All right. So here's sort of the simplest of simples. I think is like the best way to show it off. We have this types is sort of a static thing that exists for when you're writing. And then you can say in current domain. There's some options there where you can specify like, oh, I want to do a specific namespace, or I even want to load a file. If you have power in sort of specifying where it's going to look, or a subset of where it looks. And then you can specify, like say, some filters on that. In this case, it's just everything in the project, basically, that our classes should be public. You call the get results on it. It scans the entire thing, looks for every class in your project, make sure they're all labeled as public, and then it returns true or false, basically. You're like, hey, that's really handy. And that's like the best one to start out with, because it's a good way to you can test real quick, because assuming everyone writes all public because you're probably doing unit testing. It should be public, right? But there might be cases where you have some stuff that you don't want public, and then it'll fail, and you'll get a list of all the ones that fail, and then you'll know why, and then you can modify this to maybe allow the exceptions because there's reasons or whatever. All right, here's another one. Seems kind of stupid, but again, this is about enforcement of architectural rules. So again, our types in our current domain that our interfaces, so now it's filtering types down to interfaces, should have a name that starts with capital I. I just want to make sure everyone that makes an interface starts it spelled properly with a capital I for interface. That's a standard. Yo.
How do you define in current domain? Is that the project, the solution?
In current domain is, I believe, basically you're going to load it up within your test project, and then you have to make references. So basically, in current domain, I believe, is everything that it can reach. That's outside of like the Microsoft, stuff.
You can probably specify your own like assembly or something.
Yeah, you can say types in assembly and give it an assembly name, or in namespace. You can specify. There's a bunch of different options for how you want to go look at pieces to what you want. But in general, for most like testing and just for simplicity's sake of showing these demos, in current domain, sort of the lazy man way to say everything. All right, let's see here. All right, so here's sort of another one. And, our goal here is we want to make sure the presentation layer doesn't reference, any data repos. It should go through the business, it's an interior application, presentation, business layer, data layer. We just want to make sure no one's getting lazy and going, let's go straight to the database. So, this is sort of a simple test. We're saying types in current domain that reside in namespace, now we're specifying specific namespaces, should not basically have dependency or have references to anything in the sample library data area. So that's kind of a neat way to be able to enforce some of those things. Here's one that gets about enforcing some rules as well. All right, we want to, again, repo classes and data namespace should implement the iRepository. So again, we're focusing. You can see where you get the idea of the filter, because everything before should is your filter. So get everything that resides in N, our classes, N has name ending to it. Now we filter down the classes with that should implement the interface type iRepository. Sometimes people forget to do that. So now we can guarantee that anyone checks in code, they're always going to have a reference for all those repository classes to iRepository. Here's a fun one. All controllers should have an authorized attribute. If you don't realize if you don't throw an authorized attribute on your controller, technically it's a public endpoint that anyone can access, depending on how you set things up. So, good way to make sure you enforce that. All classes that have a name ending with controller are supposed to have a custom attribute attached to them, the authorized attribute. So there you go. Problem solved. Yo.
Hey, question.
Yeah.
It looks like this is on an app level or on a repo basis, but I would think you have a lot of code duplication between repos. In say like you have set repos, right, that all have to adhere to the same standard. Is there a way to create the tests at a higher level than on a repo level, to where you don't have to duplicate all the tests, or potentially your new devs that come in could change them?
I mean, if they're full separate repositories. I mean, there's ways that you can do sub repos to have shared code across. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways. I mean, it's just a .NET test project. I mean, technically, you could pack that up as a custom NuGet package and plumb it up to pass it. I mean, there's ways that you could do it, but at the end of the day,
You still have to add custom.
Yeah, somehow you're going to have to wire it up so that it can load the code, reference it, and go with it. So it's sort of, yeah. It's not exactly perfect, but
I'm just curious.
yeah. All right, so that's great and all, but you might, and again, there's a lot of stuff this thing can do. I'm just like scraping the top level. So all those different, shoulds and coulds and have a reference to interfaces. And when you look at the breadth of what that thing covers, it covers, 90% of what you need. But then there's those times where you're like, yeah, but we want to test this very complex thing that it's not included in the project. So we have custom rules. And it's real easy to write custom rules. You just create a class that implements the iCustom rule interface. They've already got it set up for you. This is, sort of a crazy one, but there are some nice places that enforce certain rules, like having a maximum number of parameters on a constructor in a class. It's one of those code spell things. If I got 20 parameters coming in on a constructor in a class, probably means I'm doing a little too much in that thing, and we probably need to redo a refactor. So, it makes some kind of hard limits. In this case, they knew of an instance of this maximum constructor parameters rule that allows them to pass in a number of parameters. And the iCustom rule does the override for the meets rule. Type definitions get passed in. You can see it knows you can actually get constructors. You can find all the methods that are constructors on a class, get a list of them, check the parameter count. That's the level of detail this is giving you. You're looking at really the lowest level of what the code is. So you write it like that. It's a real simple little dude. And then here's our test. So again, you new up the instance. In this case, they're going to say, we only want 3. That's our rules here. No more than 3. So you get everything in the domain that are classes, and they should read custom rule, and you pass in your rule, and you can run it. And now anyone that puts 4 parameters on a constructor, and boom, baby, you got yourself an error thrown at you. And then you got to justify why you need that, and then you'll have to modify the test to say, all right, we'll allow 4 now at the company. Or you exclude the particular class out because there's a reason why, especially, please let us do it. 4. All right, so then the next thing to look at is policies. When you want to group multiple rules together, you create a policy. And this is just an idea of creating a higher level construct. You got these individual tests, but sometimes you want to implement a bigger thought of a rule set. So you create what are called policies. So you set up a policy, define a name, you give it a description if you want. The 4 is where you pass in all your types that are going to be in. So this types that incurred to be just to take everything again. And then in this case, we added 2 rules that have to be both true for this policy to be passed. And you can do as many .adds as you want, so you can get very complex. So again, this is just something so that you can build a bigger than a bunch of individual unit tests. We don't use it on the project I'm on. We just did individual unit tests for all the little pieces of things we want to enforce. We thought it was good enough. But again, it's an option. If you start getting bigger and more complex, then this is where you could go. And this would be something, as we kind of mentioned, you could pack up a custom policy as a NuGet package. You could reference that then in your tests to do some shared code like that. Would be kind of a good way to do that. All right, so basically, this is just a sample of what the architecture test can do. And I encourage you to go get started today, checking it out, looking at what it's capable of. The project's actually really good up on NuGet, GitHub. They have a bunch of test samples where they've done, I think, probably 100 different examples of common things that people are probably going to want to do in their test. They've already written a whole test suite to do that. And they made a little dummy library so that they could do all these tests. So it's great for when you want to get in. You're like, yeah, but I don't know exactly what test I want to write or anything like that. Look at their code. They probably have a good sample of already showing you how to do the thing exactly what you want. But again, I love the Fluent API. It's so clean. It's so easy to read. I mean, it is very well written in a way that it reads like a sentence, so you know exactly what you're testing, what you're doing. And that's basically it, my friends. I just wanted to show you that. There's the NuGet package. There's a similar project called Art Unit Test Net or Art Unit Net or whatever. They both almost started at the same time, copying the same Java library. They look almost identical. A lot of the code samples probably would actually work between both libraries in some cases. There's some differences. The big difference and the reason I really stuck with the net architecture was, 1, I saw first, and 2, it's just a little more polished at this point, but there's a lot of work being done on this other one. It's slightly more active now at this point, so they're really rapidly building up capabilities. So either one, check them out. All right, who's next?
Bill's
Yes,
Yeah, come on. Anybody have any questions for Alan before you keep moving on?
You can bug me later if you think of things.
I'm already thinking, like, if I ever get to rewrite that book or do a second edition of Refractory and Sea Sharp, that'd be a nice one to put in there. I like that.
alrighty.
So while Bill's getting set up, some housekeeping things I forgot because I'm me. We do have a bathroom code for the ladies' room. The men's room, they don't value our safety enough. But the ladies' room, 5600 star, I believe, is the code to get in there. And then feel free to get up, get drinks, get snacks, come on back. Just keep quiet while you're doing that. So, and feel free to interrupt folks with questions unless your speaker doesn't want us to. So it's kind of sort of speaker preference there. But we do have everyone here, so we should be good to go. So whenever you're ready, take us away.
If I can get it to go where I want it and operate it over here. Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. It's Lightning Talk, and it's here at Central Ohio.net Developers Group. Wanted to do a graphic for it, so put in a prompt. Give me an image. It gives you two, and I don't know about this one, but and sometimes I have a different word for this kind of thing. Call it a blitz babble.
I can see that. I can see that.
This guy looks evil, doesn't he? I mean, I don't.
He's selling you something.
That's who I am. I've been programming for a long time and did a lot of stuff in Pascal and did one production VB.NET app back in the .NET 1.1 days, 2004. Spent the previous decade in a crazy place with VBA and Access databases and been trying to get over it, mostly working with Python recently. That's not the talk. Sunday morning, October 13th, 2019. Started out as usual. I got up and do the normal morning thing, go to the bathroom. And I'm in there, I hear water running. It's not me. It's like in the pipes, you know, like when your washing machine is filling. But I was the first one up, so that was not normal. So I was kind of anxious to go downstairs and look in the kitchen and the laundry room. Nothing in there. Look outside, get the spigot out there, nothing going on. I looked down in the cellar and it said, "Good morning, your stuff is floating."
Oh, no.
So I went back upstairs and went to bed and said, "That's got to be a bad dream." No, actually, I went back upstairs and woke my wife up and said, "I might need some help with this emergency. You call the emergency plumbing, we'll go figure out what to do, you know, shut off the water, the main valve in there." Now, that's pretty deep. I have boots, but I don't have hip waders. So I just put my sandals on and I said, wait a minute, there's a lot of electrical stuff down here. So I'm kind of tiptoeing in the water a little bit. Okay, it's not shocking me. I wade in. Go over to where the main water valve is and I'm turning it off and I look at the wall and the water's coming through the wall. So our main water line snapped in the wall. So I had to deal with getting the water shut off out by the water meter. And the plumber had to go back to the shop to get his big pump to deal with this, but we got it pumped out. In the aftermath, it was kind of a mess. And this is a big wooden workbench, and it's very heavy. Couldn't lift it. but water does. And if you have things sitting on top of the workbench, when it gets lifted up, it's top heavy and it tips over. So the computer sitting on top of it, they got dumped in the water. But the other thing that got wet is you can kind of see them a little bit there. This is where we get to the title of the talk. It was sad. And these books, you can't tell looking at them here, but when books get wet, they expand. And so they were wedged in there. I could not pull them out. And the books were not the priority because we had a lot of other stuff down there in the cellar, including some pictures that have never been scanned. So this is like every flat surface in the house had pictures and documents spread out. Books, they did not fare well. They were kind of, later on I had to get a crowbar to pry them loose where they had wedged in there. And so the books sit around, and a month later, I decided it was time to recycle them. I mean, even if they dried, they would be wrinkly. And reading the book with the mold spores wafting up in your face, that really doesn't seem pleasant. So, decided to recycle them. But I could tell that that might happen, that I'm going to be wondering, where is this book? I know I have this book. I wouldn't know if it was one that went out. So at least take pictures. And then I'll have a way to know if the book I'm thinking of was one that was lost. Almost a year later, I decided I wanted to catalog rather than having to look through the pictures. And why spend a few hours doing a thing by hand when you can spend days automating it? Amen. So the first cut was using something called Tesseract, OCR, optical character recognition. I had used this tool for a couple other things, and it does great when you have really crisp, like screenshots and things like that. A nice PDF or whatever. But these pictures, well, they were not intended for OCR. They were just for me to look at and say I had that book. I wanted to automate this. I used Tesseract. Doing it on Linux. I installed the Tesseract engine and the OCR for English. That's what I installed, and then a Python script that would just iterate through the images, extract the text with Tesseract and write it to a text file. To maybe help it work better, I did a little pre-processing using the Python imaging library. That's a bit of the Python code, but this is a .NET group, so we don't care about the Python. This is the result. This is one, just looking at one. It pulled a few things out, but not much. And so with these results, I just kind of put that aside. But I am going to go back in time here to August, when this guy, somebody you've seen before, Matt has websites, and here are a few of them. He did a talk here in August about automating a dog, which included analyzing images with Azure Cognitive Services. And it kind of came back to me later in the year that I wanted to take a look at that. And so I'm going to try Azure for OCR, inspired by Matt's talk. I looked into the Cognitive Services and created a console app to use some of that. Pulled some links. These slides are web pages, and I'll have a link to them on my GitHub. So anything that you're interested in. And I'll note here, by now, this has been renamed because Microsoft renames everything.
Azure Cognitive Services has also been renamed.
Yeah. So anyway, things may refer to Form Recognizer. It's document intelligence, at least yesterday. Briefly look at setting it up. You have to have the Azure account, then you can create a new document intelligence thing here. Give it a resource group, pick a region, give it a name, pick a tier. I was able to use the free tier. I wasn't doing that much with it. Setting up the network, the only thing here that you select the network, and down here, put in your IP address so you can connect to it from your console app. Finishing it up there. Once you've done that, you have the resource, you can get a key and an endpoint, and you'll use that in the settings. Console app gets the key and the endpoint from the settings file, creates these classes, these objects that are used to analyze the document. This project is on GitHub. It was not recent, but anyway, code's out there, and it's probably not anything you want to reuse, but at least you can see what's in there. The NuGet packages got the form recognizer, and there's a newer version now for the document intelligence. It's in beta, but I created a new version of the console app to try the newer stuff, but this is still looking at the old one here. These other 3 packages are about loading the configuration from a file, the settings file, where just get the key and endpoint from Azure. There's a settings class that's used to store those, so that those settings from the packages can pull it in, read it from a config file. And I don't know if this is a good idea, but a lot of times for secrets, when I have them in projects, I like to keep them outside of the project tree, because I can back up the whole project tree, synchronize it somewhere, and then the settings are sitting somewhere else. In this case, under my user profile, I've got a folder called Keep Local. Still up to me to do it, but at least I don't have to worry about it getting checked in. Get copied somewhere else. Anyway, that's kind of the setting story. It's not really. That's the way I do it. I don't know if it's.
Speaking of which, you recycled the key that you showed us a few slides ago, right? Like that's not still live, right?
I think this key actually is still live. The one that says "not the key" at the beginning.
Okay.
I just.
Yeah. Okay.
Not to say I wouldn't do that. I could actually do that. Just put it up on the slide. Form recognizer. Return this result from this cover. May not be perfect, but it's pretty good considering the condition of the image. And here's the one from Tesseract, just for reference. It did a lot nicer job. What's next? Now, I had big hopes when I was planning this and kind of getting back into it, and didn't quite get it all done. What I've done so far uses tools that recognize text, but using tools like use LLMs, it can actually recognize books, and that's really what I wanted to get to and plan to leverage some of those tools. This is a book, and this is what the book is. And someone who's kind of inspiring, but besides Matt, he's pretty good. But I've also, more on the Python side, Simon Willison has done some interesting stuff. And you should check out his GitHub if you're into AI, LLMs. He has a lot of tools, a lot of command line stuff, a lot of Python stuff, but then generally just good information about using those tools. And he did a talk using AI for journalism, where he showed taking a very quick scan of a bookshelf, and this Gemini was able to take that short clip of video and give him a list of every book that it saw, and it saw books that were partly covered. So that was pretty impressive. And so I want to throw these book images at something like that. Also, back to Pascal, you mentioned Anders Heilsberg, because he helped me feed my family when back in the 80s and 90s when I made a living programming in Pascal. And he moved to Borland and helped create Delphi, helped create C#, worked on the development of TypeScript. And then, anybody listen to Hansel Minutes? We talked to Anders about some new creation called Type Chat. Now, Type Chat sounds interesting, and it sounds like what I want to look at for kind of wrapping up this project when I do, but I haven't Haven't done it yet, so I don't have anything cool to show you there. So I'm going to get back to the books. It's not all of them. Here's just a few I was sorry to lose. The Firebird book. Anybody heard of Firebird database? I used this on the job once. It just worked for an internal application on any of the database server. Another thing, there's Firefox and Thunderbird. They wanted to have Firebird, but these guys had already taken the name, and I think they complained. And now everybody knows Firefox, but nobody really knows Firebird database anymore, I don't think. This is one, and these books, it's sentimental value for this in a lot of ways because I'm not doing Turbo Pascal now, but this was really helpful back when I was. I learned a lot from this book. Haven't done much C, but this is kind of a classic that just feel good having it on the shelf, and it's gone now. I haven't replaced it. I did some microcontroller programming when I was getting started, and did some assembly language, and I just like these microcontroller handbooks from the manufacturers. They're good reference, and it's neat to look through all the circuit charts and stuff, if you think that's neat. Here's the classic Peter Norton pose. Now everybody just knows Norton's something that sells you malware disguised as anti-malware or ways to protect your identity as if you can. Yes, this was from back when you had to know your IRQ numbers or couldn't get your PC working. Charles Petzold's Windows Classic. That was a good one. And I really missed this one. Anybody use Rebel? I used it on the job for one thing once a long time ago. And so maybe I don't miss that one so much. Had to wrap up with something. So, thank you. It's wmelvin.dev. It just takes a link. It's a link to my GitHub where I will have these slides if for any reason you want to see any of that stuff again. All right. Thank you.
A moment of silence for the books. All right.
Thank you, Matt.
Any questions for Will?
That's okay.
That's okay.
That C book is still a Bible.
What is that?
Oh, yes, large language model. Yep.
I think the last time I was coding, last time I was coding Turbo Pascal, I was breaking my 486. I was trying to work with a more graphical interface. So it takes me back. But yeah.
Oh, yeah, you could brick things with some of that low-level graphical.
I noticed. Yeah, my parents weren't happy, but I noticed.
I thought Pascal was a teaching language.
Well, you actually could use it in production.
They drilled it into our heads at OU when I was
Oh, yeah. It was the teaching language before Java.
I couldn't use it at work. You did.
Did you end up going back and replacing any of those books that you missed?
I have not replaced any of them yet.
Okay.
And some of them are available on O'Reilly, online learning with Safari Books Online. And I have a subscription to that. I figured it costs about this. It was like $200 a year, and I used to buy a computer book at least 4 times a year that cost about $50 a piece. So
I understand.
So I've had that for a long time, and I'm out of here.
Thank you.
So,
James, I'm told James gave this talk as a lunch and learn somewhat recently and did very well. And so I wanted to experiment to see if we give James less time, does he do equally as well, worse, or better? So this is us for science, but James is talking about Playwright, which is one of the more exciting things about testing coming up on that. So.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, come with me on this journey and we'll dive in together. So, test automation with Playwright. Just a quick introduction. I'm James Otworth. I've been coming to these meetings for a short while now. Software engineer at Foxton. I've been working in software for about 5 years at this point. And my very first project that I worked on as a dev was a Selenium test project, which had over 1,200 test cases and pretty much spanned our entire web commerce site. So coming back around to today to do Playwright is definitely the world tour on what has changed since then, and I'm more than happy to walk you through that. So what is Playwright? It's an open source library for end-to-end testing. For those who don't know, different kinds of testing we have, unit testing. Hopefully you know that as a developer. Just very low level, method level testing. You have integration testing. Does all my apps work together? Do all these components fit together and operate right? End-to-end testing is more of, is this user journey valid? So in the context of, say, a web application, as a user goes through a website or a portal, are the steps that they're taking and what we expect them to be able to do, is that valid? Is that accessible to them? Does it work the way that we intend it to? And that's what Playwright's bread and butter really is, you know, let's interact, let's script out a test to mock up a user, walk them through the website, and ensure that their journey is valid, no matter what changes we make to our code base. Playwright offers a unified Fluent API, very similar to the Arch testing that we were describing earlier. Very English reading, I would say, very grammatical. And it's not just for end-to-end testing either. Any sort of repetitive, I would say, task that you want to automate through a browser, Playwright can do that. I've included a few logos here. These are just a few of the people who use Playwright, a few of the companies. So you see Disney here, OpenAI. Maybe some of you have heard of a wonderful app called Slack. Very nice. Just to list a few. So unsurprisingly, Microsoft uses it. They kind of started it. So less surprising, but it's now an open source project. So you don't have to pay for it. It comes off the shelf, similar to C#. It's maintained by a community that's primarily led by Microsoft. So you've probably heard of a few end-to-end test automation frameworks that are on the market right now. Selenium, I think, is one of the more established. But I'm going to make my case for Playwright. What sort of evolution has it provided in the end-to-end testing experience? And, you know, in what ways does it build upon what we're used to from an end-to-end testing framework? So just a few touch points here. It's cross-browser. So whether you're testing on Chromium or WebKit, you know, Firefox, any sort of modern browser, Playwright plays nicely with. You can write tests and run it natively in those browsers. So pretty useful, right? If you're going through and, like many companies, you have a lot of manual testing to get done, and you want to run all those permutations through all the varieties of common web browsers, Playwright can do that for you. Even better, even outside of browsers, you can test on any platform. So Windows, Linux, you can run it locally. It's also built to run through a CI/CD pipeline, of course. And you can run it in a headless or headed mode. So as opposed to always spinning up an actual browser instance to test your code, it can be run similar to a unit test. So you can run it in a headless mode. That's what that is referring to. It's cross-language, so you're not just stuck working in C#, .NET language. Pick your flavor. TypeScript, Python. I know we have some Python folks here who are very, if you're scripting out end-to-end tests in the UI, is elements they don't always act in a manner. What I mean by that is, that's what we call a flaky test. And then you're spent, going back through your stack trace, trying to find where it fails, trying to add in explicit timers. Oh, wait 3 seconds and then try. Oh, it doesn't seem to work all the time. Try 5 seconds. Don't need to worry about that with Playwright. Something I'll get into more a little bit later in my talk, but Playwright has a way of waiting, retrying, and recognizing until a specific element is available before it tries to interact with it. And it does that without the developer having to do any sort of extra tooling or implementation. It just natively provides that within the API. That's great. I love that. Even better, when a test does fail, Playwright has a native ability to take all the traces from that. It'll give you the stack trace, You can configure it anywhere in your test configuration file to take screenshots, videos, anything that you want to provide in a report, say within the context of a CI/CD pipeline. Have that all available to you for a fail test. You can quickly identify maybe this test needs refactored, or maybe this test isn't quite worth it for the amount of maintenance we put into it. Similar to those of you who are familiar with XUnit or NUnit or any other kind of unit test library, you can drive data through that, through different attributes. Playwright supports that. So if you are a software developer and you have, say, multiple roles of users on your website, you have different experiences that you would expect, you can drive that through attributes, and you don't have to duplicate tests for it. You can just pipe it directly in. Like I said earlier, simulates user behavior, so if you want to hover or any other actions that you would expect to have on the DOM, Playwright will do that. What's also really great is it has built-in support for accessibility testing, get it by its area role, etc. And you can sort of not only just test behavior, but test, is this the best way that we can design this? Is it accessible the way we expect it to across all the other different parameters and variables that we have? Even better, Playwright comes with a large number of tools, which is really great to help you generate tests, get them stood up quickly, and really take a lot of the weight off of trying to stand up a test framework. So it's CodeGen. CodeGen is a great way, I'll show you some images of it later on here, where you can spin up a browser instance with the CodeGen tool. It will watch you as you walk through the DOM, click through elements. It'll let you natively write assertions there as you're walking through the web page, and it will generate that test for you, whatever language that you specify. And then from there, all that's left is, cleaning up the test and writing it, whatever best design practice that you want to implement in your organization. And the Playwright Inspector, which is kind of a part of the CodeGen, is really great. You get to walk through each of those assertions and actions that Playwright is helping you generate. And as you go through and rerun your tests, you can step through it the way that you would expect to with any other code in your IDE. That's pretty great. See if this is readable. Not quite, but this is a good example of kind of what it's like. If you're a developer and you're going, okay, I'm going to try out Playwright. Let me spin up a quick test. I'll go ahead and do a .NET, CodeGen command, spin that up within the context of my test project. And as you go through, and the example I have here is where you're at the actual Playwright website. You can see we have different attributes here. We have separate tests. It's starting to look very similar to XUnit or any other common .NET framework test suite, right? So it's very similar to a unit test in that you can run them individually and such. You could run them as a collection. They're all completely parallelizable, which is great. One of the greatest aspects of Playwright is how quick it is, especially in comparison to other test frameworks. And it's very fluent. I know this is kind of stretched out, small, not really readable, but it is very fluent. So expect page.getByRole, area role heading, Playwright enables reliable to be visible async. It's very clear what the test is doing. And every assertion that you have within that library, it's very evident what it's doing. And that's great. And this is more of a kind of design topic here. I just put up some quick examples just to help illustrate what I'm discussing. Playwright will generate code. That's great. It'll generate tests for us, but they're not always the most, I would say, maintainable design. A common issue that you have when you're writing out a lot of these end-to-end tests is you very quickly get very verbose tests, especially with the Playwright CodeGen. It'll really generate several lines of code. It's a little messy. We want something clean and maintainable and extendable. So I like to talk about page object model. Those of you who work a lot in end-to-end tests or have some experience with it might be familiar with that. It's just the idea of encapsulating locators for all the elements that you expect to continue to use throughout your tests, encapsulating them within locators. Playwright's great. It has its own dedicated interface and classes to support for that. So if I write a series of tests which mocks out a page For example, this is a commerce page. Conceptually, a commerce page has different components within it that we can utilize. Let's write reusable ways to obtain those elements. Obtain them by a very specific manner, which I'll get into here shortly. And then that way, if someone else comes along and they need to write out new tests for new feature, for example, test out that feature, they can just leverage the same locators that we've had written before. And so that way, you're not left with these huge verbose tests, these giant test files. You have common implementations that can be extended and used wherever. So definitely encourage page object model. Really great way of having clean, repeatable code for testing. On the left here, you can kind of see this attribute here that I have. This is a web element. And I have here the attribute data-test ID. And that's what a lot of these methods are using here. Playwright has as one of its features that it offers, it lets you grab a component by something called test ID. And the concept of that is code changes, the DOM will change as we change and update our code constantly to accommodate new features, etc. And so a great way of ensuring our tests don't break and that we can always feel confident to get the same component, day after day, is we put an attribute on it that's dedicated to being obtained by Playwright. And so that way you really enhance the resilience of your tests. You don't have to worry about flakiness, even when changes are introduced and the entire web document is changed. You still have a reliable way of obtaining that component, and you don't have to worry about the maintenance nearly as much. And that can really help you build some really effective, maintainable test projects. Just put a cap on it. Maybe some of you are thinking, oh, Playwright looks pretty great. This could really be something that my team could use. There's a lot of rich resources that is provided for Playwright. So Microsoft has its own learning path. Highly recommend those if you haven't used those before. It'll walk you through everything from installation to scripting out your first test and even best practices and designs there. There's a huge suite of documentation. As I mentioned before, Playwright's not just for .NET, but there is a very rich source of documentation. This YouTube channel and other communities, they're always pushing out new content on. They're always adding new functionality to Playwright, which is great. And there's a community. There's a Discord you can hop on, or a Slack channel. You can engage with other developers who are using Playwright. You can talk to them about their experiences. So that's pretty much it. Any questions? Anyone curious about anything we talked about? Go ahead.
Has it been around long?
It's been around for about, I would say, a few years. It's relatively new.
See, I always wonder with Microsoft because they pull the rug out from under a lot of things.
Microsoft gave us TypeScript. TypeScript's still around.
Yeah, there are a few
This
things,
is the same kind of
but
approach.
newer things
Yeah.
I always wonder about.
Yeah, I love Microsoft. I don't always trust Microsoft on the front end aspect of things to not replace it with something else. This is not just for .NET applications. This is for all web applications.
Oh yeah.
Is it coming from like Node and JavaScript world?
It really is supported almost any package manager.
I just wonder what its
language.
how it's natively developed.
That's a
Not
good
that
question.
matters to users.
I know it's based initially off of Puppeteer. What language that comes from, not sure. But yeah, it's a good question.
James has not yet been coached by the development team responsible for that. I'll let you know.
Not yet. Yeah, go ahead.
If someone wants to create an online chat room, like an app such as Discord, can someone use this tool to help them to develop it?
I would say this is more suited towards a web application. Anything that runs in a browser would be probably the best use for this. I imagine you'd have quite a difficult time getting to work on something more native. If that makes sense.
So if just a Discord browser app, does that
Okay.
work?
Yeah.
Online chat room on the browser instead of something on your phone.
Yeah, I mean, you could really anything that runs through a browser, you could likely automate with Playwright.
Okay. Because I see this is UI, and you have those APIs for you to coordinate.
Right. Yeah. just a base rule of thumb. If it runs in a browser, Playwright can interact with it pretty well.
My experience with Playwright has been pretty good. It was pretty easy to get spun up. But the tests I generated failed 1/7 of the time.
Mm-hmm.
I had something going out to isitfriday.com and it would just test it. And it worked most of the time, but Fridays, not so much.
Interesting.
So, I don't know. A little questionable, so I'll have to ask you more about that next month. But,
yeah, no worries.
Round of
Maybe
applause
Friday.
for
Maybe
James.
Friday.
Sean, did you have a question back there?
Yeah, real quick, how did you get involved in this?
How did I get involved with it? Well, my company.
That's a great question.
Do you mean this meetup or do you mean Playwright?
Playwright.
My company, we have started to stand up testing frameworks essentially. Standing up test automation. And so we started discussing it, and I said, well, we should really try Playwright. I've read a lot about it, and it seems pretty great, especially compared to my experience with Selenium. And someone said, oh, so you have experience with Selenium. Sure enough, I am now the Playwright captain. So
It's not just that, but I've heard tales that people on other teams were told, don't spike into Playwright, that's James's baby. Now, I can't confirm that. But round of applause for James. I noticed that you didn't say parkour on your way up. Is there a reason for that?
I think it's better to say it when it comes naturally. I was hoping maybe you could jump over some tables for us.
Well, that's probably not happening. Dexterity is my dump stat. Actually, I got a couple dump stats, but dexterity is definitely one. James will be back next month with some more interactive demos. Oh, yeah. That'd be awesome. Yeah, see what's wrong with Visit Friday.
Takes a minute, hopefully. Tested it earlier and it took a little bit, but it eventually got it.
Those services and the USB-Cs to HDMI's, that's why I switched off of them.
My Surface is getting the bulge from the battery.
That's where I will just come from too. We may have to bring out Alan's Chromebook again.
Let's try.
Hey!
Where it's looking though. Let's see. It just gives me screen to extend or second screen only. Yeah. For sure, just duplicate it.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
Almost.
Let's try. Oh, what is that? There we go. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. Woo! Parkour! There you go. All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Landing Talks. Hope everybody's been enjoying the pizza. Before we get started, just a little bit of background about me. My name is Sean Bigelow. I have a very long history with parkour and teaching parkour. I've taught over 300 people in my first year. I recently became certified as a Scrum Master in December, and I have a lot of interest in that. I'm looking for any company I can get my hands on to work with, so if you know anybody, give me a holler, talk to me. If you have any questions, just save them for the end so I don't get sidetracked on myself here. But let's talk about Agile, but more specifically Scrum and Parkour, and what can Scrum learn from Parkour? So, first we'll start with a quick rundown of Scrum, where a group of guys got together in Utah, of all places, which is not a very tech-heavy place, and enjoying their ski vacation, 17 of them decided to get together and formalize a document on what they thought could be better about the industry and approach to software development. One of the new things that came out was Scrum. So now, other side of the coin, Parkour. Late 90s, there's about 9 guys in France who are starting to get attention for the stuff they were doing and the strength training and what is this weird thing that they're doing, what's it called? And eventually a French filmmaker, maybe you've heard of him, Luc Besson, started to catch on too, and he started making documentaries and eventually made a movie. So Fifth Element, From Paris From Love, if you've seen any of those, you know the guy. He eventually went on to make a movie that only released in France called Yamakasi, which was about these 9 guys. And through about the time the 2000s hit, documentaries started coming out in English. So the United Kingdom started to get a hold of parkour and free running. It started getting very popular, and then a little thing got big in North America called YouTube, and that's how a lot of Americans got introduced to parkour. So, why these two things, and why the hell do I care? And I'm glad that nobody asked. So, there's a lot of overlaps in parkour and in Scrum and in Agile, which I find very interesting because these are two things that were created independently of each other by different groups of people and in different countries that don't even share a language. So how did something that has a more martial art approach and something that has a more framework approach, how do they have overlaps? And so before I get into that, first I want to talk about a key concept in parkour. Now, many people, their concept of parkour is like, oh, that's that YouTube video I've seen where people jump off of buildings, or I've seen that episode of The Office where they jump out of cardboard boxes and they scream parkour at everything they do. And for a lot of people in the US and the West especially, that's about all they know. When in reality, there's a lot of physical training and a lot of mental training and a lot of very serious planning and meticulous planning that goes into everything that they do. So, one of the key concepts in it is a thing called breaking the jump. Now, contrary to popular belief, these are not adrenaline junkies and they are not fearless. Breaking the jump is a term that they use as the ever-present encountering of fear in the discipline. So, the best example of this is one of the 9 guys, his name is Chow Bell. When they started, he was so afraid of heights, you couldn't even get him to stand on a chair. Heights freaked him out that much, and now he jumps off of buildings, he's jumping between buildings, but it was this concept of breaking the jump, of taking just little steps and slowly iterating upon them that led to them being able to do these really finished product, really spectacular things. So, some of the things that go into the term breaking the jump is once is never enough. So if you do something in parkour or in the world, if you do something that's uncomfortable or something that you weren't sure you can do, and then you do it and you're like, okay, that wasn't so bad, and then you move on, in the philosophy of breaking the jump, you have not mastered that concept. You haven't mastered this thing yet. And so then they say, well, now you need to do it again. And so you do it again, and you're like, okay, I've done it twice now. I think I've got a pretty good feel for it. No, twice is not enough either. They say twice is lucky. You got lucky. Anybody can do something once, that's a fluke. Twice, that's lucky. So they say thrice is mastery. You have to do it 3 times to make sure you're a master of it. And you might think, well, I tried it and I didn't do it well. I didn't succeed, or maybe it just went horribly wrong and you bricked your computer somehow. So some people might consider, I didn't succeed, so I'm a failure. In the world of parkour, they say, if you made the attempt, even if you didn't make your jump or you didn't meet your challenge, it's not a failure. You tried, and you overcame that fear that stops you from trying, and that's the most important part. Like, now that you failed, you get to come back to it and say, well, why did I fail? Why didn't this work? And another thing is being comfortable with the uncomfortable. In parkour, fear is constant. It is always there. I get really freaked out by handrails in my time in parkour, and I have the shin scars to prove why. But I slowly overcame that fear. It took me several years, but I slowly worked at it. So instead of avoiding something because it's uncomfortable or freaks us out, they came up with a framework to always work at it called breaking the jump. So in the spirit of that, what can Scrum steal from parkour? The philosophy in parkour is based around adapting. Is you're going to encounter obstacles, you're going to run into things, and you need to train and be prepared for when that happens. And I think that's something that Scrum can take as well. So back to breaking the jump, pushing your comfort zones helps to spark growth. Don't avoid something just because it's uncomfortable or it makes you uneasy. That's an area of opportunity. Why neglect it? Work on it, improve. And another thing is that parkour people are very data driven. They are very meticulous. They keep very, very, very detailed records about any time they're trying to achieve something new or work on a jump that they're not sure about. They keep track of what was the weather like, what was the time of day, what was the temperature, even down to what kind of music were I listening to. Some of the more hardcore French guys won't listen to music at all because they feel like it influences them, and that if they were to get into a situation where they needed to use their skills, without the music, they may not be able to call upon those skills. So that's the more hard end of the route, where some people put on specific music because they know it will get them in a good zone. It'll give them good energy that they can draw upon. So I think that that's something else that Scrum could take from parkour, is meticulous personal data tracking. We do a lot of team tracking. We do a lot of how's the team doing? What was the team's capacity? What was the team's velocity? But when was the last time, what was my capacity? What was my velocity? How have I done compared to a year ago, even in just like a personal project? So here's some other ways that we can improve. In sprint planning, honesty, that seems like a no-brainer, kind of on paper, right? Be honest, who hasn't preached that? Who hasn't said it? But it's important. It's good to remember, because there's a lot of times where external pressures can cause us to maybe not voice things, or we don't want to bring up when there's a problem. Transparency is another part of the honesty trifecta here, is that if we're not honest and we're not transparent, how can we tackle issues when they come up? How can we deal with things when they happen? And sometimes we need to change the culture. A lot of times we don't want to admit that in a plan, things are going to go wrong. When you're coding something and you push it to production, it doesn't always go perfect. So give yourself time to work on the problems when they happen, instead of just saying, we will reach our destination and it will be fine. Let's give ourselves the time saying, what could go wrong? What do you forecast will go wrong? And what do you have in preparation to solve that if it does? The daily stand-up is developers need to be encouraged to speak up. When you're stuck, you should be able to say something. And in a lot of environments, if you say that you're stuck, then you may risk some social damage. You may risk your reputation to say, I don't know, or I'm not sure what's going on. Or when we do run into blockers, okay, you ran into a blocker, it was resolved, and then we move on. But what about tracking it and keeping data on the blocker? How did the blocker happen? How was it resolved, and what did we learn from it? And how can we apply that to any future blockers? And another thing is the juniors in the team. There's nothing that really tests you like a junior developer. It's like throwing a monkey into the machine. Sometimes they make a mess, or they go, why is this way? And you come over and you look at it and you go, yeah, why is that way? And so juniors, I think, should be the first people to report in a daily stand-up. If they go first, then there's a lot more value to see where is the junior at And what are we doing as a team? Because the junior is the weak point of the team. They're new. They're still getting the hang of things. They're still learning. But if they go last or if they go in the middle, there's going to be pressures for them to maybe omit some details because they don't want to look silly or they're embarrassed by the fact that they may not know the answer. So by having the least experienced person go first, you can quickly identify, okay, this is something we may need to address in the team, and you'll be able to see also where you stand as a whole team. You're only as good as your weakest link. And finally, the sprint retro, everybody's favorite, I know. Self-analysis plus more data equals better insight. So just as the parkour people are keeping track of things down to what kind of music was I listening to and how might that affect my mood, what kind of music were you listening to when you ran into your blockers? Maybe that helps you, maybe it hinders you. Maybe you're going to go on the really hard direction and say, maybe I just won't listen to music when I'm working on really difficult code projects. And constructive feedback. It sounds like a no-brainer. It sounds like something that every company loves to say that that's part of their core values or something, but it is important. Anything that is a problem is kind of like a fire. And if a junior developer starts a fire, as they often do, we need to be able to address that sooner than later, because the longer the fire goes on, the more damage it causes. It's not as fast in the world of software as feedback as it is in parkour. In parkour, if I mess up my jump, it hurts me, it damages me, I get an injury. I know within a matter of seconds if I did something wrong or not. I don't need somebody to help me know why I'm laying on the ground writhing in pain. And lastly is your vulnerabilities and your weak points can become your opportunities and become strengths. Just because you're not good at something doesn't mean you should avoid it. How many hours really are you willing to put into something? If you're not good at something, put more time into it. Even if it's just a couple hours a week. Don't let your weak point become an area that's a blind spot. It may not be your strong point, but use it to push yourself, use it to grow. And so, in conclusion, I think that parkour and Scrum are very interesting because they're both about constantly adapting and growing and responding to an ever-changing environment. And I find it interesting that although they went in very different directions, there's some really core similarities in their philosophy. And that's going to be it for me. I'm Sean Bigelow. You can find me on LinkedIn. If anybody has any questions, now's the time. All right. Take your time, everybody. Yeah, what's up?
I was curious, how did you get into parkour?
I had a friend in high school who did what I thought was parkour, which was he would run up a wall and backflip, and I thought it was cool, and I was looking for a way to get in shape, and I was getting bored of martial arts, and so I saw it on YouTube and I saw the end result and tried to figure it out. And I was lucky enough to actually come to Ohio in the early 2000s and meet some of the kind of creators. And from there, I was able to just keep going.
Thank you. You're talking about music and how that impacts you. I found some certain rituals and like will really get me into the focus zone that I need to be in. And there's a job that I learned to put on a hat to drown out the lights and distractions and headphones and like. And for years, I had tricked my brain into thinking if I wear a hat, that means I'm focused now.
That's
yeah, it's weird. Yeah, and I think I actually my first book I wrote like it was like bagpipes music, a certain marching band. And it was crazy, right? Like whatever you associated, but you can trick your brain. It's really cool.
That's awesome.
So Ashley is our fifth and next to last presenter. And she's talking about growth through code, and I like this title a lot more than the other one.
The other one? Yeah, the other one's obnoxious.
Joe Exotle is very hard to understand what that's talking about.
Yes.
Yes. But Sam and I have both kind of fallen in love with this organization and what you're doing. So this is your opportunity to talk us out of helping and talk other people into it. So
Got it.
I was looking forward to your presentation.
Sure. Before I get started, I want to rip off a Band-Aid really fast. I'm a Java developer. Yeah, I'm not a .NET guy. But, common ground. I made this with PowerPoint. So, like, that's okay, right? My name is Ashley. I work with an organization called Girls Who Code Otterbein, which is a free coding club for students 5th to 12th grade. I said students, we welcome everybody. It'd be really weird if we were like a diversity initiative that cut people out. So that's kind of strange. We don't do that here. So this is some of my team. Not everybody fits in one picture. Not everybody likes to take pictures, but it is run entirely by volunteers. So this is free for the kids. We don't get paid. We just bring the kids in. We teach them about technology on Saturdays at Otterbein University. Before I get into any of the exciting part of this talk, where I show you some demos that the kids have worked on and how you can get involved and why we do this, I have to give a legal disclaimer that I'm a wackadoo. Anything that I say should not reflect on my employer, JP Morgan Chase, Girls Who Code, or our host organization, Otterbein University. Okay, so as far as we can tell, this specific club, it works like Girl Scouts, like anybody can start a club. Our club at Otterbein University has been around for like 6-ish years, and we have covered all kinds of different topics, ranging from hardware to software. The most exciting, the last half of the existence of the club has just been absolutely like launched into space. People are talking about it all the time. People want to get their kids involved. Matt and Sam want to be involved for some weird reason, but basically, this last part is the big exciting thing that I want to show you some projects from. Speaking of launched into space, this is the scary part where I play a video game in front of you guys. Okay, so this game was designed, that was a close one already, was designed by 3 high school seniors from around, all right, maybe I should play it and then tell you about it. Little space shooter game. I'm also streaming on Twitch. So they designed this game. They all were going to apply for college soon. They didn't have a lot in their portfolios, so they came to Girls Who Code because they wanted to build up as they started applying for college. I believe they are all currently in college. Kendall, is that correct? Yes. All of them got into the programs that they wanted, so that's a win. They designed all of the pixel art there. They made all of that. This is their baby, right? This game is all them. We did not do any part of that except play it in front of you. And then the other thing, Joe the Axolotl. This is the video game that I used as a title for my Star Trek talk because the kids were really excited about. I had to look up what an axolotl is, and like it took me 3 tries to spell it. It doesn't matter. So this is a little platformer game designed by a student from Johnstown, I think. But she designed all of this all by herself. This little lovable guy that is destined to rival Mario. Oh, thank God for bugs, right? The girl who wrote this is, I don't need it. The girl who wrote this wanted to make a video game. She heard about Girls Who Code Otterbein and didn't want to be a part of her computer science class because it was all boys. None of her friends were in it. So she came, she built this app, or this video game, designed Joe the Axolotl, just so you see what happens when you die, which I usually do on a live demo, so she made all of this. It's really cute, right? So we're insanely proud of her. The point here is showing you these games that have bugs and stuff, but what we encourage the kids is be brave, not perfect. If they spent all of their time trying to get the perfect little axolotl or make him dance, or I don't know what axolotls do, but if they spent all their time doing that, they wouldn't have a finished product. So that's something that we harp on at Girls Who Code Otterbein. Before we get into this demo, I want to caution you, this was a website designed by students in 5th to 8th grade specifically. It's extremely flashy. So if bright lights and dancing bananas and things like that are going to affect you in your health in a negative way, please don't scan it. Like, be smart. Make good decisions. And with that, if you wanna scan this, turn your volume up. Turn your volume up.
Sounds like a Java trap.
A Java trap?
Everyone's
This is called fishing, right?
So this is a website designed by 5 girls, their initials spelled out OSAAM, awesome. If you turned your volume up, go to the tab called How to Be Great. This is from our semester where the kids all made personal projects. This is one team. I'm like insanely proud of the awesome. Like, I wouldn't have come up with that. That's really smart. I'm of course not here to talk to you guys about what causes the gender gap or whatever. I'm not qualified to talk about that. I'm a software engineer, but I don't want anybody to say it's a confidence issue because these like 5th graders nominated themselves greatest coders in the nation. So feel free to peruse the rest of that website. There's memes. There's a page on optical illusions that they put a prank in there where they switched the menu tabs around. They thought that was really, really funny. They're really proud of that. Anyway, we're super proud of these kids. I only have software things to demo because the hardware gets disassembled at the end of every semester, unfortunately. So that concludes the exciting part of the demo. This is your cue to tune out if you're ready. The rest of the talk is about how we make this happen. If you saw that goofy little website, those video games, and you were like, whoa, that's amazing. How does that happen? The kids built it. But these super awesome people are behind the scenes helping them Google stuff. I don't know if like it ever comes up for .NET folks, but Java guys don't know what we're doing most of the time. We're Googling stuff all the time. We're teaching kids how to solve problems by Googling it. We are not robotics experts. We are not game designers. We are not, I hate front end, I hate it so much. But like when the kids want to build a website, you sit with them, you help them look stuff up and figure out how to do it together. And that is part of the learning process, and it also helps us be better. Anyway, these people, I love them so very, very much. Okay, why we do this is really complicated. This is an ugly slide, so is the next one. On purpose, this is supposed to be overwhelming. You all are here, you chose to be here at like 6 o'clock at night and learn something about technology. I think it might be a mistake, but you chose this over something else, right? Why? There's tons and tons of different ways that you can get into technology, starting from birth all the way until, I don't know, the day you retire. You're like, I want to learn about technology. It doesn't matter. You decided you liked tech over something else. We don't understand why. Not up to me to say why. There's tons of ways for you to decide you do like it, but there's even more ways for you to decide you don't. So for all, even though we're like the coolest people ever, right, in this room here today, there's way more people not in this room. There's more people who chose something else over tech. And there are more reasons for you to leave tech if you are female. There are more reasons for you to leave tech if you belong to the LGBTQ+ community. There are more reasons to leave tech if you identify with a racial or ethnic minority. That doesn't even cover hostile work environments. It doesn't cover, all of those creepy things that we try to pretend doesn't happen. There's a lot of things that push people out of tech. So the purpose of Girls Who Code is not to make everyone an engineer, because that's just not what we do here, okay? The idea is to show them why we love it. We have to show them why we chose tech over other things. We make STEM fun and we do really weird things. We try to be brave, not perfect, right? That's the goal here. And I said at the beginning that we welcome everybody in our club, kids 5th to 12th grade. We don't check what your gender background is. We don't give a shit. So I didn't have a good way to use this video, but I really wanted you to see it. This is a day to build confidence. We smashed pumpkins. It was awesome. Yeah, I just thought everybody should have to watch some kids smash pumpkins. But we believe that diversity comes from bringing different people together, talking about ideas, and learning together based on what your experiences are and my experiences. So everybody is welcome to participate in Girls Who Code, and everybody is obligated to help the next generation find their place, whether that's in technology or not. You should see what it is from our perspective. So that's all that I have. Girls Who Code is going to start back up in September after Labor Day. We don't have exact dates yet, but if you would like to get involved, my partner back there, Kendall, has a couple stickers. I printed off like 200 at the beginning of the year, and I'm down to like 15. This is so exciting. I get to reorder stickers. But she has the rest of them, have some contact information up here. The top one, gwcotterbein@gmail.com is our club email. I check that one more often than my personal email. I am sorry. We also have Instagram, but I don't know how to use it, so Kendall's in charge of that one. Any questions? Yeah.
How did you get involved?
How did I get involved? I started working at Chase 5 years ago, and I was like, wow, I'm never going to be passionate working in a bank. And Chase is one of many co-sponsors for Girls Who Code Otterbein. So they said, you want to start volunteering with them, you want to start teaching classes, and I've been there ever since.
Nice.
Yeah.
What's your cat's name?
This is Dusty. I put this picture up because he's actually yawning, but it looks like he's like hissing, so that you wouldn't ask me any hard questions. It's psychology, I think, probably.
Well, you failed.
Oh.
I still want to get involved. That was wonderful.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
I guess you're next.
And our last talk for the day is Jeff Miller talking about career navigation in IT and dealing with the curves. I think is roughly the title there. So I'm looking forward to this one. I guess while you're getting set up, raise your hand if you would like to be considered for our JetBrains license raffle. It's a coupon for a free year of some JetBrains product. And they're awesome. They're wonderful. Even if you're in Java, they're still wonderful. Okay. Okay. CV1. Say the number. You'll remember it easy. Say 2. The other one. So 9. Okay, 9. Do you have a random generator? Oh, 10. Cool. Do you have a random number generator?
Probably beat one. One to what?
1 to 10 inclusive.
10 inclusive.
Do it again.
Number is 7.
7. Who is 7? Woo! All right. I'll hook you up with the code afterwards. But it's a coupon code.
I am attempting something I've never tried, which is to present from an iPad. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
I'm an Apple hybrid user. I like most platforms, Linux and Windows, and I actually use Apple as well. Let's see if this works. If not, I can talk through it. Is it what? Oh, is it the dongle? Sorry.
Now, don't move.
Don't move.
Stay right there.
Does anybody remember the old TV with rabbit ears?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Where you had to kind of do poses to.
We had 5 channels. Yeah.
Yeah. Steve Wozniak of Apple fame tells a story about how he created a signal jammer, and he'd take it to the student union, and they had one of these TVs with the antennas. And in certain key moments, he would activate it, and he would wait until the students like convinced each other how they had to stand, and then he'd turn it off, and it would go back to normal.
That sounds like something.
And then after a few more minutes, he'd hit it again. And they're like, "No, you got to hold it like this." So that's what this feels like. So yeah. So I'm actually going to show you my notes for this talk, which is brave, I think. So this outline is roughly how to not do a great lightning talk using a ChatGPT outline. So I started with ChatGPT, and I was on vacation last week and a half ago, and we went to Florida, went to the ocean. It was a lot of fun. I got a really bad sunburn because I'm bad at applying sunscreen. We used the spray, and I went like this. I thought I was good. My wife did my back, and my back was fine. But I had a splotch up here on my shoulder, one here, and one on my chest. And And it was not fun when I got back to the house we were staying at. And so what's funny about that, a little bit, besides being miserable, is my wife had brought a bottle of aloe. And I thought, oh, that's great. I will just apply some of this. I'll get through it. And so I did that. And then we went out to dinner at a great Italian restaurant in Jacksonville called Catullo's. If you ever get to Jacksonville, it's amazing. But you got to get there early at 5 o'clock to get in because there's not reservations. So we did that. It was a great meal. Got back home and I was still kind of miserable from the sunburn. And the funny thing was, I started to reapply this stuff. My wife walks into the bathroom and she's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm putting it on." And she's like, "That's my hair gel." I'm like, "Oh, well, no wonder I didn't get any relief during the meal." You know, there's similar colored bottles. There's some purple and some green. And I thought, oh, well, I guess the liquid was supposed to be green, not the bottle. Anyway, I got through it. There's a joke Matt saw on my Twitter feed. I've decided that as my skin peels, I'm going to call that dandruff. So, anyway.
Was your chest hair spiky?
Yeah, the chest hair was, I mean, it was looking good. I mean, I wasn't showing off to anybody.
That's all the time we have.
Yes, exactly. So like I said, how to do a lightning talk poorly with the ChatGPT outline. If I spend 9 minutes talking about everything but, then you won't have to worry. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, I need help putting together a lightning talk about career development using a theme of curves. Examples include learning curves, the forgetting curve, the hype curve, the adoption curve, and the sigmoid curve as described by Charles Handy. And, you know, condense it down to 12 minutes and whatever. So, believe it or not, it spit back the title that I'm currently using. So, thank you, ChatGPT. Overall, the theme came back pretty good. I did want to define what a career is because there's actually one definition that we seldom hear. It's a profession, you know, especially one requiring special training or a person's progress through their professional life. But one of the themes that I wanted to talk about was looking at our own progress through our careers in terms of curves that we see a lot. If you've ever heard of the adoption curve, where there's the early adopters, the innovators, and then you get the laggards, which is probably sometimes me. But then you have people starting out that haven't gotten into that cycle already. And if you're new to IT, you're probably thinking, well, I'm behind everybody because I just got here. So what I wanted to mention to you out of this is that if you start to look at these curves as a model for your thinking, then you can find yourself taking that next step. And what I found is a lot with, if you ever look at a stock market chart, anybody ever see those spikes like this? What everybody wants to do is predict where it's going, right? They're like, ooh, that looks like it's ticking upward. Let's hope it doesn't do another dip, right? Well, you, in machine learning, of course, you got all these prediction algorithms, and we love to talk about those, but it's taking a lot of dots and trying to infer lines and then say something about them, some kind of inference or prediction. So along with that, you know, as you take on these learning new skills, there's some advice I'd like to share with you. Some examples of the hype curve, like weren't we just talking about blockchain and cryptocurrency 2 years ago? What happened to that? Now it's AI everything. You know, every service that I log on to, every app says, oh, hey, now we've got an AI subscription. What I haven't figured out is how to subscribe to the AI features that they've sprinkled into my tools without running up a bill that's this big. Because they all want to charge me $8 to $10 per month per service. And I'm like, can I just have one $20 a month AI bill as like a utility for everything? That would be great. But now we're talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning, and so what we get instead, we talked about the hype curve. Well, the hype curve is actually not the adoption curve. That's Gartner has the hype cycle, and where you start out is everybody's crazy about AI or crazy about Bitcoin or crazy about whatever. And then you take this big dive, and it's called the trough of disillusionment, where not everybody's into it anymore. It was the cool thing yesterday. Well, there are certain peaks and dips where you should not think of them as like good or bad. You should think almost the opposite. Buy low, sell high, right? What happens when the stock goes down? You're like, oh crap, I gotta sell all my shares before it goes any lower. Well, maybe not, right? So one of the things that we look at is trending, and there's a really good model here, a curve that you probably haven't seen yet, and that's called the sigmoid curve by Charles Handy. He talked about anything that goes through a cycle has this inception, and then there's a growth spurt, it reaches maturity, and then it kind of peaks and declines. Has anybody ever heard the term jumping the shark? Do you know where it came from? Fonzie, right? Yeah. It's like Happy Days was a cool show until they did that thing, and then it just kind of went, right? So what you see here, the peak and the decline is really that kind of jump the shark moment where, hey, I think I've settled into my career. I've got some good things going on. Maybe I can, settle back a little bit. But then you crest at the top, and then it's like, oh, geez, they're not calling me quite as much as they used to, or maybe the salaries aren't paying like they used to. And the trick with that is that you need to plan on this to happen. It's predictable. It's all predictable. We don't know what the next big thing is, but we know that there is a next big thing. And so when you take that into account, what you get is, if you plan for it, you can detect that right point in this curve where we're reaching the maturity part up here, and then we can plan to start something new that we're not great at yet, but we're going to start to build those skills. While we're strong in this first area, we're going to kind of bring this other skill up to speed. Like, I'm suddenly transforming into a React developer. I always call myself full stack. I don't know that I've always deserved that title. It's fun to put on my profile, but suddenly, I'm struggling through the learning curve of React at a client where they thought I knew what I was doing when they brought me in. So now I'm becoming more adept at that. And so if you see this this little piggyback, these sigmoid curves, they build on each other. And so that's something to consider. There are some other, there's another definition of career. It may be an old English term, but it's similar to the word careen. And you say, oh, I was careening down the hill. That means you're traveling at a high rate of speed. But you can also say career in that sense. And so the thing that you have to keep in mind is that as you're making these decisions, you should always pause and consider some of the factors. It's not always good to pour yourself entirely into learning one thing. We got the curve that's the law of diminishing returns. Unfortunately, this is like a transparent JPEG on a dark background. So just imagine that there's a peak again and that you have that decline when you're done. So there's a point where if you're investing in your current skill even, that you're probably not spending your time the best way. So if I'm trying to become the best XYZ developer because that's what I've been doing for a while, then you're going to overspend. So I took pre-calculus and trigonometry together in my senior year in high school. I was in an advanced math track, and then I got burned out. I took like a year off. They had this self-paced math. Anybody do a self-paced math course? I'm not good at that. So it was like a study hall, and they say, here's the book, go teach yourself math. No, thank you. So anyway, but what I do remember is integrals capturing the area under the curve. Does anybody remember that? And so you take the x-axis and the y-axis, and you find that area, you slice it up, and there's sigma notation and all that stuff. But basically, there's a point where there's just a sweet spot. And wouldn't it be great if there were formulas in our lives that would tell us now, right? Where's that buy, sell moment? Where's that career pivot moment? Well, there aren't, and I don't have them for you. I hate to disappoint you, but the idea here is that if you think more broadly about it, if you spend some time and thought about it, you can be strategic about it. Another type of curve that I've been considering is the forgetting curve. You've heard of a learning curve, right? Did you know there's also a forgetting curve? And that describes the phenomenon of how much you lose and how little you retain as time goes by, the less you use it. And so one of the things that I use as a tool is called spaced repetition. Spaced repetition says, hey, if you review this and then you give yourself a little bit of time and then you come back to it and you do that over time, you're going to retain it a lot longer. The forgetting curve kind of stretches out. So this learning curve here, and it's not a great picture of it, but a learning curve is often misstated. Who thinks a learning curve represents something difficult? When somebody says a steep learning curve, what do you think of?
An uphill climb.
An uphill climb, right? Well, I was reading the article on this, and I kind of heard this before, but it's often misstated because there's an author, Josh Kaufman, who I'll show you in just a moment. What you may not realize is that the curve is time versus experience and learning, and that first incline is very high, but that's actually the amount of acclimation that you're getting in that first period of time. And so getting from beginner skills to mastery is a long plateau. But in a very short time, you can actually get enough skill to get over that first hump. And that's a curve that is talked about by Josh Kaufman. There's a book called The First 20 Hours. Anybody heard of that? If you haven't, that's great because now you know. It's How to Learn Anything Fast. He's the author of The Personal MBA. Have you heard of that? Okay, Josh Kaufman basically dropped out of his master's program and said, you know what, I don't need to spend $100,000 on an MBA when I can learn personally a lot of the information that they're teaching or that I would need and do self-study. And so he kind of got famous for that. But this book actually talks about how to, his claim is that in the first 20 hours, you can get over the hump with enough skill to decide if you want to continue. Because how many things have you tried and you just quit because it's too hard? I like to play the piano. I can imagine other instruments like guitar, like 6-string guitar. I play bass guitar, but my fingers don't do the what you use it with the. I just can't do that on an acoustic or electric. But what he's saying, and he demonstrates it through several chapters of the book, is that if you use a systematic approach, a practice, and it gives 10 steps here, things like choosing a lovable project. I mean, building a game, right? That's an awesome way to learn, right? So focus your energy on one skill at a time. Decide how good you want to get, because if you're like shooting for Mars, you're probably not going to be happy with your result. But if you're like, if I can play my favorite song and be able to do that well, you break it down, you get tools, you eliminate barriers to practice, and then you set aside dedicated time for practice. And what he says is that you should have a fast feedback loop and emphasize quantity and speed over quality. There was an experiment that they had students in a pottery class, and one of the things that they challenged them is split them into two groups, and they said, okay, this group, we want to make as many pieces as possible, and that's going to be the basis for your grade. And this group, we want you to make the best piece ever, and the quality is going to be the basis for your grade. Well, what happened was at the end of the term, the group of students that were to create lots of them actually had better quality work than the people that just focused on perfection. And so if you do a lot of repetition, right, that's a feedback loop. Now, This is a good pause point. One of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit, and I plan to maybe write about this or turn it into a longer concept. The curves that you get dealt with in your career, right? There's how am I coming along, and you can compare yourself to others and say, am I lagging or whatever. And there's some danger in that. I think you should at least compare yourself to your best, your personal best, and that's the kind of comparison that you should do. But as you're heading through your career, you need to consider the curves that can happen. I personally was on disability for 3 months because I had a health issue, and that was a real curve for me. You know, it took me a while to come back from that. And so, you know, it's not all, you know, making your brain 3 sizes bigger. You know, it's not an indefinite climb. You're not, you know, these sigmoid curves, you're going to reach a peak in your career where you're going to say, you know what, I'm not going to do much more. I'm going to help mentor others. I'm going to serve a greater purpose. Ashley, you're helping people that need to learn new things. And, you know, I've started mentoring in a mentoring program. I meet once a month with someone that's just starting their career, and it's been very rewarding. And so this curve is the top of a tombstone, and I actually have a picture of my own tombstone, believe it or not. My first wife passed away in 2012, and I used the GIMP to design and Inkscape to design our headstone. So talk about a weird tech skill learning situation. But it did give me pause, and it did give me a way to think about what I'm headed toward and what's worth it. Now I have a son. He's 5.5 years old. He's starting kindergarten. And so the part of the reason this outline is so rough is because I have a son and he's starting kindergarten, and I have a life, right? So always consider, as you're planning your next move and you're going for that next skill, you know, take a pause and reflect, and don't lose yourself in measuring yourself against what you think you ought to be good at. And so, you know, I don't know who this person is, Tierney or whatever their name is. It's probably moldy on top, so you can't really see it. It was a free image that I can use without copyright, so that's how it got in there. But I will say that, you know, when life throws you curves, or when you're looking to build your next step in your career, value yourself and value others. You know, the curves that you could think of are the curves like not knowing the answer, or saying, hey, come along, or maybe welcoming people in. You know, that's that big group hug. And I won't tear up or anything. I think this is the wrong setting for that, but you get the idea. And so be thinking about curves. There's a lot of them out there, and you know, you can find yourself in them. And I just hope that speaks to your ambitions, but also your self-worth. So thank you. I'm on LinkedIn if anybody cares to connect. So,
any questions, comments for Richard?
I was curious if you'd heard of like the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just had that sent to me today, so I think it's really interesting. I was curious if you had seen any like evidence or data backing one of the slides or the images you had of the Sigmund curve growing on itself. It almost seems like the Kruger effect, that curve is the inverse. If it didn't grow, if it descended instead, you know? And I'm just curious if at that moment, what that moment is, you know, the make or break or the fork.
Well, it's interesting. The Dunning-Kruger effect, if you've not heard of it, is that people typically have the opposite bias of their experience level. Like people am I saying that right? Like somebody is overconfident when they have very little experience, but if they got a lot of experience, they're like, I don't know anything, or they have imposter syndrome. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, and the I guess the journey that an individual might go on when they originally think they maybe have a greater sense of or greater foundation knowledge than they do value, like, I guess, that journey?
Well, I think the sigmoid curve, as framed earlier, is taking a step back and saying, you know what, I'm not an expert now. I may be strong in this area, and maybe that's just your own self-perception. But wherever you're at, you can say, okay, here are my strengths. I'm better at this than I am at this other thing. And I'm kind of looking to the horizon, and what am I willing to be bad at first to get to that next level? Because you're always trying to kind of jump to the next lily pad or whatever. So I think the imposter syndrome is you kind of have to get past that if you're thinking that way, right? You're like, I know I'm not going to be good at first, and I'm willing to be bad at first as I'm learning this new skill.
Part of the value of side projects.
Definitely side projects for sure.
You can be bad at something that doesn't matter until you're good enough to be better.
Yeah, and hopefully there's a book. I would love to share it with you. Unfortunately, the guy that wrote it disappeared from the planet. It's called Overlap. I had the audiobook on RSS feed, and suddenly everything that he'd ever done just he like deleted himself. But the overlap concept is that you're always doing it. It's the sigmoid curve concept where you're going from one thing to the next, and that you're always presenting yourself, branding yourself as a particular thing, but you've got that side project which is going to lead to your next thing. So, yeah.
Why lucky stiff?
What's that?
Why the lucky stiff?
The lucky stiff.
As someone who deleted himself
Oh yeah.
years ago.
Well, okay.
Really, the Ruby
I don't know if it's cyber stalking, but I did look deeply into where this guy might be.
On that note, we are done for tonight. We'll be back here on August 22nd.
Yeah.
Doxed. We can now chat, hang out, have leftover pizza, chips, all that good stuff. But yeah, this is great. Thanks for presenting.
So who won the?
Keep those conversations going.
Yeah. Who won the prize?
Seven.
Awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.